You walk past it every single time. That long refrigerated wall at Sam's Club, meat wrapped and stacked and priced, ready to drop in your cart. And you are paying nearly double for something the store did to it that you could do yourself at home in about 4 minutes. I know that sounds impossible, but I found the exact spot where your money quietly disappears, and it is not the meat itself. It is the cut, the tray, and the label. The trail behind that markup leads back to one change made in the late 1960s that rewired how every store in America sells beef. And by the end, I will hand you the exact words to say at that counter, straight out of a 1942 government bulletin nobody reads anymore. You do not need special tools. You already own everything you need in your kitchen drawer. Let me back up and tell you how I fell into this, because I was not looking for it. It was a Tuesday morning, a little after 8:15, at the Sam's Club just off the highway near me. I was standing at the meat case with a package of ribeye steaks in my hand, 4 of them, and the sticker said $13.98 a pound. That stung, but I was about to buy it anyway. Then I looked down. On the bottom shelf, in a thick plastic bag sealed tight, was a whole boneless ribeye. Same beef, same grade, and the price on that one was $8.48 a pound. I stood there doing the math in my head. That is more than $5 a pound difference for what looked like the identical piece of meat. The only thing separating them was that one had been sliced into steaks and set on a foam tray and the other had not. I put the steaks back. I bought the whole one, and I could not stop thinking about it the whole drive home. That night I started pulling the thread, and the deeper I went, the angrier I got. Because it turns out this is not a coincidence or a fluke. It is the whole business model. The savings I stumbled onto by accident used to be the normal way every family in this country bought meat. Somebody changed that on purpose. And once you see how, you cannot unsee it, and you will never pay that steak price again. So let me show you the first clue, the one that stopped me cold in that aisle. Here is the thing nobody tells you about that meat wall. The price per pound climbs with every single thing the store does to the meat before you touch it. Not the quality, the labor. When you buy a whole ribeye in the bag, the industry calls that a subprimal cut. It is a big, solid section of the animal, sealed in what they call cryovac, which is just vacuum plastic that keeps it fresh for weeks. When the store takes that same subprimal, unwraps it, slices it into steaks, lays them on a foam tray, wraps them in film, and prints a fresh sticker, the price jumps between 30 and 50%. For 4 minutes of cutting, I wanted to be sure I was not imagining it, so I went back 3 more times over 2 weeks and wrote the numbers down. Whole boneless ribeye, hovering around $8 to $9 a pound. Cut ribeye steaks from the very same cooler, $13 to $15. A whole beef tenderloin in the bag, right around $9 a pound. The little filet mignon steaks cut from that exact tenderloin, $18 to $22 a pound. Same animal, same day. The knife did all the marking up. Now here's where it got strange for me. I always assumed those steaks cost more because steaks are somehow better meat. They are not. A filet mignon is simply a slice off the tenderloin. A ribeye is simply a slice off the ribeye roast. There is no upgrade happening. The store is charging you a premium to do a job that takes less skill than carving a Thanksgiving turkey, and they are betting you will never notice the whole cut sitting 3 feet away. And once I understood that, a bigger question started nagging at me. If breaking down your own meat is this simple and this cheap, why did we ever stop? Because my grandmother did not shop like this. My mother did not either. Somewhere between their kitchen and mine, buying a big cut and slicing it yourself went from ordinary to strange. So I went looking for the moment it flipped. And that is when the trail stopped being about steaks and started being about money, big money, the kind that reshapes an entire country's habits without anybody voting on it. Because to understand why that whole ribeye is hiding on the bottom shelf, you have to go back to a slaughterhouse in Iowa. For most of American history, meat came to your town as a hanging carcass. The railroad brought in halves and quarters of beef, and the local butcher, The man in your neighborhood with the white apron broke those big pieces down right there and cut whatever you asked for. Your family knew him by name. He would cut a roast thin or thick, grind you a fresh pound, save you the bones for soup. The skill of turning a big piece of meat into dinner lived in every town, and a good part of it lived in home kitchens too. Then came 1967. A company called Iowa Beef Packers, later known as IBP, did something that changed everything. They started what the industry calls boxed beef. Instead of shipping whole carcasses to local butchers, they cut the beef into those big subprimal sections right at the plant, sealed them in cryovac, and shipped them in boxes. It was cheaper for them. It cut their shipping weight because they trimmed the waste off before it ever left Iowa, and it moved the cutting away from your neighborhood and into a handful of giant plants. I found the numbers on how fast this took over, and they stunned me. In the early 1970s, boxed beef was a small slice of the market. By the late 1980s, it was the overwhelming majority of how beef moved through this country. In roughly 20 years, the local butcher who broke down carcasses in your town went from normal to nearly extinct. And here is the part that matters for your wallet. Once the cutting moved into those central plants, the grocery store stopped being a place where meat was truly butchered and became a place where it was mostly just repackaged and marked up. But the story did not stop there, and this is where I felt the hook go in, because the industry figured out something even better for their profits and worse for yours. They realized that every time meat changes hands and gets one more step of handling, they can charge for that step. So they invented a whole category built entirely around charging you for convenience you never asked for. They call it case-ready meat. Case-ready means the meat arrives at the store already cut, already trayed, already wrapped, already labeled, ready to go straight into the case. Sounds helpful, right? But think about who pays for all that cutting and traying and wrapping and labeling. You do. Every tray, every sheet of film, every printed sticker, every minute of labor at that central plant is baked into the price per pound. And I found trade studies from the meat industry itself from the early 2000s openly discussing case ready as a way to add value, which is their polite phrase for add cost. One report I dug up put the packaging and processing premium on case ready cuts at a range that lines up almost perfectly with what I measured with my own eyes at that cooler, 30 to 50%. So there it was. The reason the whole ribeye hides on the bottom shelf while the trade steaks sit at eye level is not an accident of stocking. It is the entire design. They want you to grab the version that made them the most money on the way to the shelf. And the version that cost them almost nothing to sell you, the whole cut in the bag, gets tucked down low where you have to bend over to find it. Now, I know exactly what some of you are thinking right now because I thought it too, standing in my kitchen with an 8-pound piece of ribeye and no idea what to do with it. You are thinking, that is fine for a butcher, but I am not a butcher. I do not have a big cutting table or fancy knives or a walk-in cooler. I would ruin it. I would waste more than I saved. I want to talk straight to you for a minute, because you are the exact person this was designed to discourage, and I was that person 8 months ago. Let me show you how little you actually need, because it embarrassed me how simple it turned out to be. Here is everything I used the first time. One sharp knife I already owned, a plastic cutting board, a stack of freezer bags, and a roll of freezer paper that cost me under $4. That is the whole toolkit. No saw, no special equipment, no training. Because when you buy a boneless subprimal like a ribeye or a tenderloin, there are no bones to cut through. It is solid meat. All you are doing is slicing across it to make steaks, exactly the way you slice a loaf of bread. Let me walk you through that first ribeye the way I wish someone had walked me through it. I took it out of the bag over the sink because there is a little liquid in there and it looks alarming and smells strong for a second. That is normal. That is just the vacuum seal doing its job, and it airs out in a few minutes. I patted it dry with paper towels. Then I looked at the piece and found the long direction of the muscle. To make steaks, you cut across that muscle, straight down, and you decide how thick. I like mine about 1.25 inches, so I just eyeballed a width close to my thumb's length and cut. From that one whole ribeye, I got 12 good steaks. 12 thick, beautiful, restaurant-looking steaks. I wrapped each one in freezer paper, or you can lay 2 in a freezer bag and press the air out. I labeled them with the date and put them in the freezer. The whole job, from opening the bag to closing the freezer, took me under 20 minutes, and half of that was me being nervous and slow the first time. Now it takes me about 8. And here is the money part. The part that made my wife come look over my shoulder. That whole ribeye ran me about $68. 12 steaks. If I had bought those same 12 steaks trayed and wrapped at $14 a pound, cut the same thickness, I would have paid well over $120 for the identical meat. I saved more than $50 on a single cut in 20 minutes with a knife I already had. Do that twice a month, and you are keeping over $1,000 a year that used to vanish into foam trays and printed stickers. Before we go further, I want to point you towards something that pulls all of this together in one place. I put everything I have learned about buying meat the smart way into a digital book called Meat Smart, and if you want the fuller picture of frugal living, there is also Deep Frugal and the Full System, which cover the wider habits behind this same kind of thinking. You will find them linked in the description if you want to go deeper than what I can cover in one video. For now, let me keep walking you through what I found, because the next layer of this trail is where it really pays off. If cutting steaks feels like too much for the very first time, start even simpler. Buy a whole pork loin in the bag, the boneless kind. It is one of the cheapest cuts in the whole store, often under $2 a pound. Cut it in half. Roast one half whole like a Sunday dinner, and slice the other half into thick, boneless pork chops. There is no way to mess it up. You will pay 1/3 of what those same chops cost on a tray, and the first time you do it, you will feel a little robbed by every chop you ever bought pre-cut. I know I did. But the whole cuts on the shelf are only the first layer of this, and here is where the trail took a turn I did not expect, because there is meat at that store that never makes it to the shelf at all. Once I got comfortable buying the whole subprimals I could see, I started wondering what I could not see. So on one of my trips, I did something I had never done in my life. I walked up to those swinging doors by the meat case, found the button, and asked to speak to the meat cutter. A younger fella came out, wiping his hands, a little surprised anybody had asked. And I said, plain as I could, "What whole cuts do you have in the back that never make it onto the floor?" What he told me rearranged how I shop. He said the store gets in whole subprimals all the time that they either run out of room to display or that they only put out on certain days. He said if I wanted a whole brisket, a whole beef tenderloin, a whole boneless ribeye, a whole pork loin, a whole top sirloin, I could ask, and he would very likely have it in the cooler at the lowest per pound price, uncut, no tray, no markup. Nobody, he said, ever asks. Maybe one customer a month. Think about that. There is a back room full of the exact whole cuts that save you the most money, and the reason you have never bought from it is simply that no one told you that you could ask. That is not a lock on a door. That is a habit they trained out of us. My grandmother would have asked without a second thought, because in her day, asking the butcher for exactly what you wanted was the entire point of buying meat. We forgot we were allowed. Then he told me one more thing, almost as an afterthought, and it turned out to be the biggest money saver of all. So let me set it up carefully, because the timing is everything. He said the store marks meat down when it gets close to its sell-by date, and those markdown stickers go on at a specific time, early, usually first thing in the morning before the crowds. The discount is not small. He said it runs anywhere from 25 to 50% off, slapped right on top of the already low warehouse price. And this is meat that is perfectly good, often days from actually turning meat you are going to take home and freeze that very afternoon anyway, which stops the clock completely. So I tested it. I started showing up right when the doors opened, and I went straight to the meat case and hunted for the reduced stickers. The first morning I found a whole pork shoulder marked down 30% and 2 family packs of chicken thighs at half off. I have found ribeye subprimals with a markdown sticker slapped right on the bag, which means I was getting the cheapest cut in the store discounted again on top of itself. I brought it all home and it went straight into the freezer, and freezing at that point locks in the quality exactly as it was. The sell-by date is about the store's shelf, not your freezer. Now stack these 3 things together the way I finally did, and you feel the full weight of what we were talking out of. You buy the whole subprimal instead of the trade steaks. That is your first 30 to 50%. You ask the cutter for the cuts in the back so you never pay for display handling. And you show up early and hunt the markdown stickers for another 25 to 50 on top. I have walked out of that store with a cart of meat that cost me less than half of what the same trip would have cost the person who came in at noon and grabbed whatever was trade at eye level, same store, same meat, same day. The only difference was knowing, and that brings me to the last piece, the one that took me the longest to find, buried in a government document from the middle of the last century, because it turns out the smartest way to buy meat is not a modern hack at all. It is something we were formally taught in writing and then quietly allowed to forget. I kept feeling like I was reinventing something, so I went digging through old records, and I found it in a United States Department of Agriculture publication from 1942, right in the middle of the war, when families were being taught to stretch every cut of meat as far as it could possibly go. Back then, the government printed detailed guides on how to buy meat by the large piece, how to break it down at home, and how to get the most eating out of the least money. This was not fringe advice. This was official national policy, sent into ordinary kitchens because wasting money on meat was considered close to unpatriotic. And inside that thinking was the single most valuable idea I recovered in this whole search, and it is so simple you will laugh. It is this: do not buy meat by the cut, buy meat by the muscle, and let the same piece become 3 different meals. Here is what I mean, and this is the finale I promised you. Take a whole beef chuck or a whole top sirloin, one large primal piece. The old guides taught that from one big cut you do not just make one thing. From the tender center you slice steaks. From the ends and the less tender edges you cut cubes for stew. And from the trim, the pieces most people throw away or never see because the store already removed them, you make your own ground beef, or you save them in a freezer bag until you have enough for a rich pot of stock. 1 cut, 3 products. Steaks, stew, meat, and ground beef or broth, all from a single piece you paid 1 low per pound price for. Here is why that is the secret that beats every coupon and every sale. When you buy trade steaks, you are buying only the most expensive slices of the animal at the most expensive price, and letting the store keep and sell the rest at a profit. When you buy the whole muscle and break it down the old way, you capture the entire value yourself. The steaks cost you the same low price as the stew meat because it all came off 1 cut at 1 price. You are no longer paying 3 different premium prices for 3 different trays. You are paying 1 warehouse price for the whole thing and dividing it up in your own kitchen, exactly the way that 1942 bulletin laid out for families who could not afford to waste a nickel. I tried it with a whole top sirloin. I got center steaks for grilling, a bag of cubes for a winter stew, and enough trim that I ground my own burger meat in a cheap grinder attachment. The per pound price on that whole sirloin was a fraction of what any one of those 3 products would have cost me trade and separated. And I sat there at my own counter realizing that a wartime government pamphlet, 80-some years old, had just taught me to shop smarter than every glossy grocery flyer I have ever been handed. That is the whole thing they took from us. Not just a lower price on steaks. They took the knowledge that 1 cut of meat is really 3 meals, that the value lives in the whole muscle and not the pretty slice, that a family with a sharp knife in 20 minutes controls the price instead of the store. Boxed beef moved the cutting out of your town. Case-ready meat, moved it out of the store and put it in a plant that charges you for every touch. And along the way, we were gently taught to feel that breaking down our own meat was somehow beyond us, a job for professionals, too messy and too hard for a regular kitchen. It is not. It never was. It was normal and ordinary and expected for most of the history of this country, right up until a few companies figured out that our forgetting was worth billions to them. The whole ribeye on the bottom shelf, the cuts waiting in the back that nobody asks for, the markdown stickers at 8 in the morning, the wartime lesson about one muscle and 3 meals, none of it is a trick. It is just the old way, sitting there in plain sight, waiting for you to reach down and pick it up. So here is what I want you to feel walking out of here. You did not learn a hack today. You took back something that used to belong to every kitchen in America, and somebody profited quietly from you not having it. The next time you stand at that wall of meat, you will see it for what it is, and you will bend down for the whole cut, and you will keep the $50 they were counting on you to hand over without a thought. If you are the kind of person who has always suspected that the simple, honest way of doing things got buried on purpose so somebody else could sell you a more expensive version, then you already understand exactly what this channel is about, and you are among your people here. Now I want to hear from you, and I am asking you directly, because I know most of you read and move on without saying a word. Do me one favor. Go find the whole boneless ribeye or the whole pork loin on your next trip. Look at its price per pound, then look at the trade steaks, or chops right beside it, and come back and tell me in the comments the exact difference you found at your store. I want real numbers from real coolers. And tell me where you are watching from, because I would love to see how far this stretches across the country. If even one meat cutter reads these comments, let us give them something to see. And if you want to follow this trail with me, subscribe and stand with the folks who are walking these old methods back into the light one at a time. Because next, I am chasing down something about the freezer itself, a forgotten way of storing meat that families used before the modern freezer aisle existed, one that kept a cut good for far longer than the date on the package would ever let you believe. That one surprised me even more than this did. I will show you what I found. Before you go, one thing. What you saw today was just the overview. Inside the Old Ways Society, I pick up right where this video stopped and walk you through the full at-home breakdown, cut by cut. Get stuck? Ask me directly, and a real person, me, answers you myself. You'd belong with thousands of Old Ways folks already inside. Just point your phone at the code on screen. Cancel anytime, one click, no risk. Now, if you shop at Costco too, I've got something just for you. In the next video, I'll show you simple tricks to cut your meat costs there every single time. It's starting right here.